I recently went to one of the coffee mornings that was
Yeah, I
hosted by
heard
the
about
Rotary.
that from Michael Schatzman. That was so nice that you came.
Yeah, what a great group of folks. I was very intrigued.
That's great.
Becca, is there a reason you don't like recording to the cloud?
A couple of times I lost it and I couldn't find it anywhere, so I don't take that chance anymore. Not
I
with
don't know if
but with some other programs.
will Geneva be able to put it on our thing? Because
Yeah.
she always tells me to put it in the cloud to get onto our playlist.
No, I never recorded on the cloud. All the recordings I've given you these last couple of years are always done from my computer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's 7:03 and Nikki has another meeting to go to as soon as she's done with our program. So may I first request all our guests to mute their devices? And we are recording this program and we will begin now. So good evening, everyone. On behalf of Faith Communities Go Green, I welcome all of you to the fifth and final program, which is a part of the series of virtual programs that we have brought to you this year. The topic of today's program is incentives to make your home energy efficient. My name is Becca Desai, and I lead the Education Lifestyles Working Group of Faith Communities Go Green. In our program today, our guest speaker, Nikki Vandevoort, will inform us about the Inflation Reduction Act, which was signed into law in 2022. She will talk about the available IRA's cost-saving incentives for adding energy upgrades in your homes, as well as discuss tax credits, rebates, grants, or loan programs. As always, we will provide you with a toolkit of resources on this topic. I'd like to first introduce our guest speaker to all of you. Nikki Vandevoort is a Fuse Executive Fellow working at the City of Cincinnati's Office of Environment and Sustainability on clean energy and electrification expansion. For those who don't know what Fuse is or who a Fuse Executive Fellow is, Fuse, F-U-S-E, is a national nonprofit dedicated to increasing the capacity of local governments to engage communities, advance racial equity, and work more effectively for everyone. FUSE stands for Fellowship for Urban and State Engagement. A FUSE Executive Fellow like our guest, Nikki, works alongside senior government leaders and the community to lead strategic projects that advance equity. Nikki has 17 years of environmental and climate consulting experience, including a background in wetland science, endangered species conservation, and sustainability solutions. She serves as the co-chair for the local chapter of the Climate Reality Project. She's originally from the Pacific Northwest, but moved to Cincinnati in 2019 with her family. Nikki has been presenting the Inflation Reduction Act education throughout the community, spreading the word that there are energy upgrade incentives for everyone: individuals, businesses, public institutions, local governments, nonprofits, and faith communities in the IRA. This year, she collaborated with FCGG, Faith Communities Go Green, Green Umbrella, the Zoo, Sunlight Power, and The Cincinnati Development Fund in pursuit of federal grant funding in support of the Energy Efficiency Initiative. She also led the effort to achieve Soul Smart designation for the city of Cincinnati. They were recently awarded bronze level designation. Congratulations on that, Nikki. This included the creation of a city solar web page, a solar permitting checklist for residential and commercial projects, a solar zoning code fact sheet, and a signed letter from the city's zoning administrator stating that accessory solar is allowed in all city zones in compliance with the code. Among many other things, she's also working to procure rooftop solar for cities' facilities and additional utility scale solar to serve the city's electricity load, as well as the city's community choice aggregation program. Nikki, it is such an honor for us to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Before I give the platform to you to speak, there are a few questions I'm asking on behalf of all of us. So, Nikki, I'll begin by asking you what we all are curious to know and learn today. Please, can you tell us how people can use the IRA incentives for energy efficiency upgrades in their homes? With the incoming of the new government in 2025, should we anticipate any changes in these IRA incentives for individual households and so many other organizations? Will it affect our cities, the city of Cincinnati's Green Cincinnati Plan's primary goals, its commitment towards equity, and its involvement with the regional climate action planning? Are there any programs or grants that will not be affected by the change in the government that you're aware of, which you'd like to share with us? Are there other options available for us to tap into for sustainability and energy efficiency? And finally, is our future hopeful for the availability of energy efficiency incentive programs for everyone? What can we, the common man, do to make the most impact?
Those are some big questions. And I don't want to eat too much time into my presentation, but I will say that my presentation will touch on all of this. So maybe I'll just get started and then,
yes.
And if I miss anything, bring it up
Okay.
because I'm happy to address any of those topics.
Thank you.
Great. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. I have done similar presentations for a number of nonprofit organizations. Let's see, am I not showing the right page? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. I've done this presentation for a number of nonprofit organizations, but this is perhaps the first presentation I've done that was more geared towards individual incentives. So I'm happy to share this. I oftentimes will share those types of slides because I know if someone's attending a webinar on behalf of a nonprofit that they're working for, they might also individually be interested in some of them, these incentives as well. And as was mentioned in my introduction, there really is something for everyone in the Inflation Reduction Act, whether you're an individual or a business or a tax-exempt organization. So I title my presentation, Clean, Comfortable, Affordable, How the Inflation Reduction Act Can Help You Be Energy Efficient, Decarbonize, and Go Solar. And there we go. We're going to cover some introductory topics related to climate change in cities, as well as a discussion of what the IRA is and its components, why I call my presentation clean, comfortable, and affordable, the specific incentives geared towards individuals and houses of worship. I figured this is Faith Communities Go Green, so I would also include those incentives that are available for tax exempt organizations like houses of worship. The elective pay provision, which is what makes it possible for tax exempt organizations to take advantage of tax credits, as well as the grants and loans, some of the grants and loans that are in the IRA. And just as an overview, I am not a CPA, I am not a lawyer. This is all readily available information on the internet that I've accumulated and vetted with experts to make sure that this is a true representation of the facts. You can look everything up. I've listed all my sources on my slides. So just to set a foundation for us this evening, as I'm sure many of you are aware, Cincinnati's climate is shifting. This is an image that shows us what the state of Ohio will feel like, recognizing that we probably have some folks here who are not in the immediate Ohio vicinity. Maybe we've got some folks from Indiana and Kentucky on the call tonight. But what we might be looking forward to in the summers of 2030 and 2095 versus the winters of 2030 and 2095 as our climate becomes hotter, wetter, with more periods of drought and extreme weather. And cities, although we are small, we are mighty. We claim 2% of the Earth's surface, but over half of the human population and over 70% of the world's carbon emissions. On the left side of this slide, we've got a screenshot of the city of Cincinnati's carbon emissions inventory from 2022. And if you kind of look at these buildings, we've got commercial buildings, residential buildings, industrial buildings, that amounts to a majority of our emissions, with then transportation coming in at about 32%. This is a brand new slide that I added in today because I wanted to specifically address some of these concerns that I'm sure many of you are feeling right now. We are at a time in our history that maybe feels familiar. Back in 2016, during the first Trump administration, we saw on day one that we were, as a nation, pulling out of the Paris Accord, related to a commitment to focus on decarbonization of our economy and severe reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. But in the wake of that, we saw a number of local governments, tribal nations, businesses, faith groups, other institutions, states, step forward and say, we are still in. And in fact, this organization, America is All In, came out of that. And today, we have over 5,000 organizations that are members of this coalition. These cities and states and organizations have set their own targets for reducing their emissions that they can affect. And it is working. We have a climate movement that is broad and deep. In that time, when we were not part of the Paris Accord, these organizations stepped forward to fill the gap for the United States. And although it is much more preferable to have a strong federal leadership, and the landmark Inflation Reduction Act certainly helped us move forward on a lot of these goals that these smaller organizations established. The work continues whether or not the federal government leads. And so you can see here, I pulled the numbers. In Ohio, we've got the cities of Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, and 12 other cities. In Kentucky, there's Louisville. In Indiana, there's Indianapolis, Bloomington, Fort Wayne, Gary, and 2 other cities. And then because I'm speaking to Faith Communities Go Green, there are dozens of faith communities that have stepped forward and said, we are still in. So Becca mentioned the Green Cincinnati plan. We are on our fourth iteration in the city of Cincinnati of our green plan. This is our sustainability plan. It was the most recent iteration came about in 2023. And just, I wanted to put this here, our mission statement for the Office of Environment and Sustainability is that we lead city government and the broader community in building a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient Cincinnati. And truly, those are the three pillars, sustainability, resilience, and equity, that drive our work, both on the paper in the Green Cincinnati plan and in our deeds, towards the goals that were set forth, more stringent goals, I should say, set forth in our 2023 iteration, with 50% emissions reductions by 2030 and 100% carbon neutrality by 2050. What happens federally does not affect the city's commitment to these goals. The city has established these goals and is committed to reaching them. So I'll address that question right there. But we are not alone, and thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, a lot of planning funding went out to the almost 70 largest metropolitan statistical areas across the nation, so major metropolitan areas. Ours is 16 counties large, and it crosses 3 states, as well as to states. So the state of Ohio also received funding to do regional climate action planning and state climate action planning. Our regional plan, we produced a priority climate action plan back in March. And then the comprehensive climate action plan will be coming forward this summer. So the steering committee is comprised of a number of cities and counties, nonprofit organizations, higher ed institutions, Duke, Rumpke, chambers of commerce, and it is led by OKI, our Regional Council of Governments, as well as Green Umbrella. Their Thrive Together Sustainability Playbook that's available on the Green Umbrella website. You can take a look at the Priority Climate Action Plan. And I just wanted to call out 2 of the measures that were identified include developing community solar to support local nonprofits and community-based groups, and to help connect nonprofit organizations with funding for energy efficiency and solar. So regionally, we are making commitments and setting forward a plan. All right, so that's the foundation. I'm going to start talking more specifically to the IRA. It is the largest investment in climate action in US history, with an anticipated reduction of 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions. It was signed into law in 2022 after the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. That's also referred to as the bipartisan infrastructure law. And although it was $1.2 trillion valued at that much money, not that full amount was not geared towards specifically climate. There's a lot in there for actual infrastructure. But the Inflation Reduction Act at almost $370 billion is primarily geared towards climate work. So before we move forward on the IRA, just one slide on the bipartisan infrastructure law, because it does have some very significant investments. So $90 billion, the largest in US history for public transit, the largest investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak, $7.5 billion into an EV charging network, $65 billion, the largest investment in US history in our transmission system and grid. And I get that question a lot about, if we're electrifying so many things, do we need to worry about the grid? Yes, and there has been funding that's been put forth to help accelerate those improvements, as well as $21 billion towards Superfund and brownfield cleanup. These have largely been dispersed through grants and loan capital. But back to the IRA. I like this image because it shows you a nice breakdown of the types of things that the IRA funded. Now, these dollar amounts are in billions of dollars, so even if it's a small slice of the pie, it's actually quite a lot of money. A little over half of the money was geared towards energy supply, so things like solar and wind, and other clean technologies. Many of the grants to state and local governments and community-based organizations have been or are in the process of being dispersed with programs that will go on for the next several years. So once the federal government has awarded those grants and the money has moved hands, it can't be clawed back. In terms of the method of delivery of these benefits, we're looking at over half of them coming in the form of tax credits. Now this says business tax credits, but I added this includes credits for tax exempt organizations like houses of worship, local governments. These tax credits are intended and designed to continue through 2032. And to speak to your question on how does the election impact the availability of the tax credits, we can't quite be sure. Economists have said tax credits tend to be more difficult to take away because people get used to them, they start relying on them and expecting them. From what I've heard, there is potential for some carving away of certain tax credits. Certainly, in order to extend the Trump era tax credits from his first administration, which will be are set to end next year, there is some thought that they will balance the budget to extend those tax credits by taking away some of these tax credits. But I could not speak directly to what may happen. If anything, I've heard that the tax credits related to clean energy for businesses and tax exempt organizations, that particular one may go away. But things for individuals are more likely to stay. So that's what I've heard. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but the IRA has had a lot of success just in the last couple years that it's been around. So last year, if we're talking about individual tax credits, 3.4 million Americans took advantage of $8.4 billion in IRA tax credits to lower the cost of clean energy and energy efficiency upgrades to their homes. That is 3.5 times more than was projected. So a raging success for those individual tax credits. And over 250,000 Americans claimed the IRA's electric vehicle tax credit. Since 2022, when the IRA was signed into law, businesses have announced $265 billion in clean energy investments, which has created 330,000 new jobs. And 75% of this private sector investment has flowed to low-income communities. So here's just kind of some high-level points on the tax credits, which are designed and intended to last through 2032. For individuals, there's no lifetime maximum. They renew annually. So in the past, some of these credits did exist, but there might be a lifetime cap. And as the IRA stands now, there's no cap. And so with the longer life of these tax credits, there is the potential to be making a plan over the course of several years. That is perhaps more up in the air since I created this slide. And then also credits can be combined with rebates, which is another form of funding from the IRA. If an individual has tax liability in order to get the tax credits. Tax exempt organizations and businesses, the tax credits are non-competitive. So unlike grants, you don't have to submit your application and hope you get it. If you meet the requirements, you will get them. Again, there's also no cap on the amount of the tax credit, just a limit on the specific percentage tied to the credit. And generally, tax credits can be combined with other sources of federal financial assistance, like loan capital. And just to note that for tax exempt orgs and businesses, while grants are issued up front, and that's nice to have money in the bank up front, tax credits are earned after a project is complete, except for the clean and used vehicle individual credit, which operates more as an upfront discount. The IRA has a few really interesting themes. I'm just going to touch on. Some folks here have probably heard of the Justice 40 initiative, and that is a requirement that 40% of the federal funding goes to historically underinvested and pollution-burdened communities. There's a map, which I have a link to in my presentation here. There are a lot of maps associated with various tax credits. So there's a bonus credit related to being in an energy community or not, and there's a map for that. There's also a very clear intention for stimulating the clean energy economy in the United States. So there's a requirement to use domestic steel and iron that's phased into some of the work, some of the credits, as well as percentage of manufactured products. So if you're thinking about solar panels, the steel and iron might be the racking, and the manufactured products would be the solar panel itself. And then also labor standards to make sure that not only are we having a clean energy transition in our economy, but we are also making these good green jobs. So why clean, comfortable, affordable? Clean because the IRA is assisting with the replacement of gasoline and methane with electricity. Thereby, we're reducing climate pollution and also indoor air pollution. Comfortable because there are energy efficiency and weatherization incentives that will ultimately make buildings more comfortable to be in, not as drafty in the winter and not as hot in the summer. And then the incentives are made so that if there is a price disparity between purchasing a greener option, that it brings that price disparity down so that the choice is more equal between your traditional choice and something that's more energy efficient. And green jobs, stable living wage jobs in a growing sector. So now we're going to get into the portion where I talk about actual incentives. But before we do that, I want to prime your brains to think about when you're looking at a building, where would you start first? And I think of this as a continuum. So the first area you would want to look at is, how do I make my building envelope more efficient and weatherized? The second thing you would want to do if you're trying to decarbonize your household is to electrify your appliances, whether that's with your HVAC and using heat pump, or your hot water using a heat pump hot water heater. There's also heat pump clothes dryers, as well as electric and induction stoves. And then the final step is clean energy and storage. Solar and batteries are really cool, but they should be considered after you've made some of these other improvements so that you can right size your system for your building and you're not purchasing a larger system than you actually need. So what does energy efficiency look like for buildings? First and foremost, it's always a good idea to get an energy audit, and there is an incentive for energy audits for individuals. Insulation, air sealing, lighting. There's not a specific lighting incentive in the IRA, but if you're converting to LEDs, that can be a really simple and affordable way to save energy, as well as efficient windows and doors and skylights. Also, choosing how you use energy in your home and when you use it with a smart thermostat makes a big difference in the amount of energy you use. However, I just want to note, smart thermostats are not included in the incentives in the IRA. Next in the continuum would be electrification. So I mentioned some of those technologies. There seems to be a heat pump for everything. I had not heard about heat pumps before the IRA, I'll admit. But also there are incentives related to upgrades to your electrical panel and wiring, as long as they're made in conjunction with some of these other upgrades, as well as high efficiency AC, which is a different incentive than actually going for a heat pump. Heat pumps are pretty cool because they do both the heating and the cooling in your building. That final step in the continuum is clean energy and storage. So most folks are going to think solar and batteries, but also some less common technologies include like geothermal heat pumps, which are extremely energy efficient, and solar water heaters. And I added this slide because I did have an architect here in Cincinnati who said that he discourages clients from getting solar because it's so cloudy here in Cincinnati. It is worth it to get solar in Cincinnati. We have mild winters and low snowfall. Yes, we have some seasonality, but you are still producing energy year-round, so long as your building isn't too shaded. So yes, it is worth it to go solar in Cincinnati if you have a building that's in a position to receive enough sunlight. And you can check if your rooftop is suitable for solar in terms of whether or not it's shaded out or not, using this solar calculator through Energy Sage, and that's a link. So when you have access to my slides, you'll be able to click on that. Now, I've talked about buildings, but there are also incentives in the IRA related to clean vehicles. And so there are individual incentives for new EVs or used EVs, as well as fleet vehicles for institutions or nonprofits or businesses. And then there's also a tax credit specifically geared towards charging infrastructure, both that individuals can take advantage of and businesses and tax exempt organizations. From this point on in my presentation, everything's a little bit color coded, and I don't have all of my slides included, so I don't have my business specific tax credits. But moving on through here, you can more clearly define my green slides from my purple slides of individual incentives versus business and tax exempt incentives. But we'll start with individuals because that's what this presentation is meant to be about. So if you were to take a screenshot of one slide of my presentation, this has a snapshot of all the information related to individual incentives. I mean, maybe not all of them, but the most common that you would be interested in. So the table is representative of the various tax credits that you can take advantage. And I wanted to show, whether you were a homeowner or a renter, if you could take advantage of those, and then where along the continuum that helps. So whether it's efficiency or electrification or clean energy. On the bullet points here, there's also, I want to point out that there is grant funding through a number of different sources. So Solar for All is a program that the state, as well as the city of Cincinnati, has received funding for. The program's neither program has been established yet, but those are forthcoming. And then there's also loan funding that should be coming through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or the GGRF. And that is representative of $20 billion that would go to a number of coalitions that will fund, individual and community-sized clean energy projects, energy efficiency, and electrification. There's also the rebate programs. Now, the state of Ohio will be rolling out our rebate programs probably in Q1 of 2025. I've been in chats with the Ohio Department of Development, who is the administering entity here at the state level. And they were hoping to turn in their application for the rebate program last Friday. So fingers crossed. They are very well aware that they need to get the funding and get these programs launched. I think the state of Indiana has already gotten their rebate program implementation plan approved from the Department of Energy, and the state of Kentucky submitted their application to the Department of Energy November 6th. So about half of the states have received their funding and or have submitted their implementation plans, and about the other half are in the process of developing and are close to submitting their implementation plans. Yeah, I think that's the overview slide. This is, if you're a visual person, helpful to look at. I know there's lots of different drawings out there of homes and where you can make your upgrades. But this primarily shows the tax credits and the rebates. But since there are so many different programs, like grant programs, and not uniformly received grants across the nation, this is just representative of those things that are mostly uniformly available across the nation in terms of the credits and the rebates. All right, first credit. The Energy Efficient Home Improvement Tax Credit under the Internal Revenue Code, the IRC. It's typed as 25C, so shorthand, you might see that referenced. This is about energy efficiency in your home. It's a 30% tax credit, inclusive of labor and installation costs. You have to claim the credit for the tax year when the property is installed, not merely purchased. So that's generally true for all of the credits. The property, the energy property, has to be in use. So for example, if you were to buy a new heat pump and it was $5,000, including labor, the value of 30% of your tax credit is $1,500, not the maximum, because this credit has caps of $2,000. This has to be applied to your main home that's existing. It's not a new home. Landlords cannot claim the credit. Renters can qualify for credits related to home energy audits, central AC, heat pumps, and electrical equipment improvements, but do not qualify for doors, windows, skylights, insulation, or air sealing materials. I'm not sure why they made a differentiation for renters. But that is to say that there are some incentives that are available to renters so long as they have approval to make improvements to their home from their landlord. But this particular tax credit has kind of two buckets. Each bucket has a maximum per year. So say this year you wanted to replace your water heater with a heat pump water heater, you could get a maximum credit of $2,000, but it's going to be 30%, right? So again, in that example, if it's $5,000, 30% is $1,500, not $2,000. And then the other bucket is kind of a miscellaneous grab bag. You've got your energy audits, insulation and air sealing, windows and skylights, exterior doors. Those all have to be Energy Star certified. Central air conditioners, and the electrical equipment improvements if they're necessary to enable the installation of some of these other properties. So in total, the annual credit cap for the 25C credit is $3,200. But this renews. So if you want to do an energy audit this year, and then whatever the top thing that your audit says is like biggest bang for your buck, go and do those two things, and then next year you could do a couple more. that is totally fine with the IRA. The next credit for individuals is the Residential Clean Energy Tax Credit, or 25D. It's a 30% tax credit, and there's no dollar limit. Like I mentioned, there was a cap on the last credit. It goes towards the cost of new qualified clean energy property, and this is technology neutral. So solar, geothermal heat pump, battery storage. It does not include the costs of associated with improving the roof if you're doing like rooftop solar. So that is something to consider. And it does reset each year. And it includes labor installation. And you can claim the credit for the tax year when the property is installed, not when it's purchased. So if there's a difference there. Again, it's eligible for your main home that is existing. Not a landlord situation, and you cannot claim the credit for property on a property that you use exclusively for business. So if you partly use your home for business, you would qualify for a portion of the credit. And then everything that I've starred here, there are energy efficiency requirements similar to like Energy Star, but it's different sorts of standards that they have to meet. I have some tools here that recently were published. I've not played around with these, but some of them are kind of like educational tools more geared towards contractors. But I think from a homeowner standpoint, if you're really interested in making some of these improvements and you want to get educated before you speak with a contractor, they would be great resources for you. But definitely this first one, the tax credit product lookup tool, if you're considering purchasing um, uh, energy property and you want to be sure that it's going to qualify for the tax credit, I would utilize that tool and make sure that it's listed on those lists. All right, so we've talked about the individual tax credits. These are the home appliance rebates and the efficiency rebates. So there's two rebate programs that each state is allocated funding for, which means that it's been set aside for them, but they won't get it until they submit an implementation plan that the Department of Energy approves. So Ohio's rebate programs, as I mentioned, they're not published yet. I don't know what the parameters will look like. I have a link here if you're not from the state of Ohio and you want to look up like what is my state, what's our progress right now. But on this slide right now is just the federal thresholds for the various home appliances. But you can see here, there's also insulation, air sealing, and ventilation. So that's weatherization. That's not necessarily appliances, as well as electric wiring. And this goes for not only single family, but also multifamily rebates. And I want to say also that this specific rebate program is geared towards low and moderate income households below 150% of the area median income. The area median income for the Cincinnati metro area for a family of four is, I'm going to say it's $150,000 approximately. So below 150% of that. Let's see, federal thresholds for multifamily buildings. They have to have at least 50% of the dwelling units that are within those area median income thresholds. There's a number of ways that they might verify income. My understanding is that the Ohio Department of Development will have a method of potentially going online and signing up for the program through their website, but that you may not be able to just go and purchase something and then get a rebate. And also these are not available retroactively. Now the home efficiency rebates program, that is open to all households potentially, but with different tiers and the largest rebates going to those with lower incomes. And the project, this is more of like a whole home retrofit, sort of a weatherization, or large systems like your HVAC and your water heating has to reduce your home's energy usage by at least 20%. So again, rebate programs in the state of Ohio, we don't know what they're going to look like, but these minimum thresholds are here set by the federal government. And then here's just kind of another look at that diagram of the house with the various types of credits or rebate programs that for the type of improvement you'd be looking to make. Switching over to vehicles real quick, if you're looking to purchase a new electric vehicle, this is a 30% credit in the form of a point of sale discount. Like I mentioned, this is not one that you have to file with your taxes later. It should be something that you receive as a discount when you make the purchase. There's two portions. It's either you get one portion at $3,750, or you get both and combined it's a $7,500 credit. It depends on the vehicle. If you go to fueleconomy.gov, it has a list of all of the eligible vehicles that meet the federal thresholds, as well as whether or not they get the $3,750 or the $7,500. And this does have an income limitation, but it's fairly high. So for married couples filing jointly, the threshold is $300,000, whereas for individuals, it's $150,000. That's for new clean vehicles. For used clean vehicles, it is a lower threshold, right? So the thought here being that used vehicles, potentially more low and moderate income households, that federal threshold for married filing jointly is $150,000, and it's $75,000 for individuals. Again, it's a 30% tax credit. The maximum credit is $4,000, and the vehicle must be purchased from a licensed dealer for $25,000 or less, not including taxes, title, and registration fees. And the vehicle must be at least 2 years old. Finally, EV chargers. If you noticed, we've been using a lot of green font. Green meant individuals, or at least multifamily. This is black font EV chargers because there are incentives for both individuals and commercial. So the individual incentive is a 30% credit with a max of $1,000 per item. The key here, though, is that the equipment must be placed in a low income community or rural area. And I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of maps associated with these tax credits. There's a map for this. So in my slide deck, you'll be able to click and see, do I live in one of these designated areas? I have a couple other resources that I think are great. In particular, if you're an Ohioan, Power Clean Future Ohio has a lot of great information. They have an Inflation Reduction Act resource hub. When you go on there, it kind of takes a while for these 4 blue boxes to pop up, but just wait a few seconds and then you can click whether you're a resident or you're a nonprofit or you're interested from a business or government standpoint. I think even within residents, when you click on that, it'll say, like, it has lists of, like, if you're a homeowner or a renter or a driver. So I like this because it also includes resources that are not just the IRA. And then also, hopefully everyone's heard of Rewiring America. They are a really great educational resource. They have a number of resources, including this Go Electric guide. So if you're a homeowner versus a renter, there's information in there geared towards your living situation. You can also go in and use their personal electrification plan platform, which will take some of your information about your household and then provide you with a plan over time to tackle your home electrification, as well as their IRA incentive calculator, which is quite useful. All right, I'm going to breeze through this next section because you were promised tax or IRA incentives for individuals, and this is a little off topic. This is for folks who are interested in assisting a nonprofit or your house of worship in pursuing clean energy or potentially EVs or EV charging. So I'm going to breeze through this similar layout to my other kind of snapshot in the green for individuals. This is my snapshot in purple for tax exempt organizations. When I mentioned earlier that there is a clean energy tax credit that could potentially be carved away from the IRA, this is the one that folks are talking about. So this is the investment tax credit. It's a 30% credit if your project is under 1 megawatt, which for the vast majority of projects that are looking to do rooftop solar, going to be well underneath that 1 megawatt threshold. Things that are above 1 megawatt are much more like utility scale solar. So assuming that you're a house of worship and you want to go solar, you could be looking at a 30% base tax credit. And then on top of that, there are 3 different bonus credits, depending on whether or not you use domestic content. That requires 100% American-made steel and iron. And then the next slide will show you over the next several years, the intention for the phase in of the percentage of manufactured components that are domestically made. Then there's a 10% tax credit for energy communities. So the city of Cincinnati within our actual borders does not really have, there's a little tiny sliver in like the California Woods neighborhood for an energy community defined as like a former fossil fuel community, or projects that are sited on brownfields, which I hope that none of your houses of worship are located on a brownfield, but if it was, could potentially qualify for this 10% tax credit. And then there's the low income communities bonus tax credit. I've mentioned a lot of tax credits. This is the only one that's competitive. So there's 4 different categories. You could get 10% if you apply in the low income community or the tribal land category, or a 20% if you were doing an economic benefit project or a low income, like affordable housing tax credit. If we're talking about houses of worship, we're probably focused on geography. Are you on tribal land or are you within a mapped low income community? Again, there's a map for that. This is the slide with the domestic content information. So if you were to have put solar on your house of worship this year and you were pursuing the domestic content bonus tax credit, you would have had to use 40% of the components domestically made for like your solar panels and your manufactured stuff, and still 100% for your steel and your iron. Projects that are larger than 1 megawatt would also have to meet more stringent requirements. Now I mentioned the 4 different categories and that this is a competitive tax credit, this low income communities bonus credit. So category 1, if your house of worship was located in a low income community, if you can see the 3rd box down, it says applications. In 2023, that was oversubscribed by 608%. So it was very popular. It was the most popular of all 4 categories because there are a lot of, this is not just nonprofits or cities or other tax exempt organizations pursuing this bonus credit, but it's also open to businesses. I should mention this whole entire investment tax credit is open to businesses as well. So it was very popular. However, this is a slide that I borrowed from the Rocky Mountain Institute. They found that you were much more likely to have won this competitive tax credit if you were a nonprofit versus a business. So something to keep in mind that if you were to pursue, it's a nice to have, but not guaranteed. This is all made possible, these tax credits for tax exempt organizations, through the elective pay provision. It's most often referred to as direct pay. It applies to 12 different tax credits, but the most relevant are going to be that investment tax credit and all those bonus credits associated with just the ITC, as well as the commercial clean vehicles tax credit and the charging tax credit, which is officially called alternative fuel vehicle refueling credit, which is just a mouthful. These are some of the eligible technologies related to the ITC. So most folks are going to be thinking about solar or batteries, maybe ground source heat pumps, but there are other options too, as well as I added EV charging and electric vehicles on here because they also qualify for direct pay. And if you're a visual learner, before the IRA and the direct pay provision on the left, nonprofits still put solar on their buildings, but they had to go through this investment tax credit existed before the IRA, but it didn't have the direct pay provision. So they had to go through their designer or their architect or their engineer. That private company would claim the federal tax credit and then offer a lower, like a discount to the nonprofit for the solar property. But it rarely would the nonprofit then realize the full value of that tax credit, right? It was just a discount, not the full value. After direct pay, the nonprofit doesn't have to go through a third party and pre-files with the IRS and gets essentially a cash refund directly from the federal government. I'm not going to go through this, but this is just essentially a copy paste from the IRS website that I have listed at the bottom here, but in case people want to just look back through my slides, that's available to you. I'm going to skip through a couple of these because I know we're running low on time, but we've talked about tax credits. There is a tax deduction for tax exempt organizations and businesses, and this is called Section 179D. And it's for if you've made at least a 25% energy savings improvement in your building envelope. So your building envelope, your heating and your cooling, your lighting, essentially your big building systems. And then I'm going to skip through that. I'm going to say here back to individuals and or houses of worship. The Clean Communities Investment Accelerator represented a $6 billion investment in expansion of energy lending capacity through community development financing institutions, CDFIs, credit unions, housing finance agencies, et cetera. And that's geared towards individuals, small businesses, community institutions in low income and disadvantaged communities. So that's going to be low cost loan capital. For larger institutions, big community size projects, we've got the National Clean Investment Fund. Some folks refer to this as the National Green Bank. And our own Ohio Air Quality Development Authority was a subawardee of this loan funding. They are going to build a long-lasting revolving loan fund through their existing Clean Air Improvement Program. If you've got a big project, like you're putting out a big, in a big solar installation, they want to hear about it. So there's a link. They're kind of taking a statewide survey on who wants to take advantage of a program like that. On the right-hand side, if you're an individual and you are income qualified, the state of Ohio's rooftop solar program through the Solar for All funding source will be rolling out. Hopefully, this says fall 2024, but it's looking more like Q1 2025. This is for direct ownership and power purchase agreements for single family households and multifamily commercial buildings. And this will be, they are also taking like a statewide survey. So there's a link there. If you're income qualified and interested in potentially getting solar through the Solar for All program, this is what, the institution you would go through. It's the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority. If you're seeing advertisements on Instagram or Facebook saying, go through our solar installer, we can get you free solar through the state of Ohio, it's likely a scam unless it's coming from OAQDA. or a trusted source, like when this program eventually gets rolled out and we find out who like the regional implementation partners are. But I would be very hesitant to click on any of those ads now. And I'm going to skip through that because I don't want to spend too much time. We're coming up on 8 o'clock. I will, for folks who are interested in doing some clean energy work or energy efficiency work on their houses of worship and you want assistance, there are the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. Depending on whether you're in Ohio and Indiana versus Kentucky, there are different ones for your EPA region. Eligible technical assistance for folks who are located in environmental justice communities, including nonprofits, faith-based organizations. It's free assistance related to guidance and training for grant writing and management, project development, mapping and engineering, budgeting, a lot of different services that they can assist with. So a really useful resource. There is a grant makers sub-grant through the EJ Thriving Communities. And I want to point out here that they have, for tier 1, they have a $75,000 non-competitive grant for severely capacity constrained CBOs. I am not sure if that is inclusive of houses of worship, but I think it's worth checking into. And I have some resources here linked. And then here are some additional resources related to whether or not you're in the city of Cincinnati, in the state of Ohio, in Hamilton County, state of Kentucky, state of Indiana, all related to primarily low and moderate income household resources for either home repair, which can include, energy upgrades, loan program, or other programs like the Home Weatherization Assistance Program, which is a federal program that allocates money to the states for assisting folks with like weatherization of their home. And last but not least, coming up on November 20th at 7 p.m., I just found out today from one of our partners that an organization in Indiana called Faith in Place is hosting a webinar with Solar United Indiana, which is a sister organization of Solar United neighbors. They're presenting a virtual webinar called Faith and Solar in Indiana. If you are interested in going solar with your house of worship. And this is my last slide. We have the electrifycincy.org website. It's super useful. It's geared towards individuals. So lots of information related to that energy spectrum that I spoke to. All right, that's the end. I'm sorry, there's lots of stuff in the chat that I didn't get to, but I can try and answer questions now.
No, thank you so much, Nikki. You have given us such a world of information, and I'm so grateful that you allowed me to share your slide deck in the toolkit, which everybody who's here will have access to. So at their own pace, they can go through that and, click on the links you've provided in your slide deck and get more information. But there are a couple of questions. Some of them I thought you answered as you were presenting.
Okay.
One of the latest ones is, can the new government retroactively take away the tax credit for 2025? Or are we good at least through the end of 2025?
I can't say, unfortunately. I know that we are well into 2024, right? The end of the year is just around the corner, and I'm sure there are many organizations that have already went through and done solar and are hoping to get a tax credit for 2024. I am not sure if that funding is going to be there, frankly, and I sure hope it is, but we will learn more in the new year.
One of the earlier questions was how do replacement window upgrades work with tax credits? And I think Doug asked that question, and it seems like you have addressed that in your presentation. But if you want to briefly touch on it again for the sake of Doug.
Sure, that was Windows, you said?
Yes, replacement windows.
Okay, so replacement windows would go through that 25C tax credit for home efficiency, and they would have to be Energy Star windows. Um, and again, it's a tax credit, so there is guidance on like the IRS website if you're pursuing that kind of qualified. You would have to make sure that you meet the qualifications for that type of improvement. But that's a specific tax credit you would want to look up on the IRS's website.
Are there any other questions from our audience for Nikki? She's been in a busy working day, and then you've given us your time right now, and then you're going to another meeting from here. So I can just imagine how tired you must be, Nikki. But truly, thank you so much. It's been such a great honor to have you as one of our speakers in this year's program. And I hope that everybody in the audience also appreciated all the information that Nikki shared with us today. Um, I'd just like to take a minute to thank everyone. Uh, Thank you once again, Nikki, for the wonderful and very educational program, the presentation that you shared with us today. Thank you to the audience for your interest and attention to her presentation. We hope that you have copied or at least downloaded the toolkit link, which my husband, Fred Desai, has placed in the chat a few times today. Thank you so much for your help with that, Fred. I'll also send you all the toolkit link via email very soon, if not tonight, sometime tomorrow, because I have the addresses of everyone who registered for this program. So friends, we hope that our program today has been educational and informative, like all our other programs, and that this one too will continue to inspire all of us to stay steadfast and dedicated in our efforts and commitment to do whatever we each one are able to do for the good health and sustainability of our beloved planet. On behalf of Faith Communities Go Green's Education Lifestyles Working Group, which is my group, I also want to thank our co-chairs of FCGG, especially Joanne Gerson, who is here with us today, for constantly encouraging our working group and continuously supporting us to keep bringing these valuable programs to you. Thank you all once again for attending our program. Nikki, thank you so much for not just being here with us and your presentation, but letting us browse through all that information at our own pace by sharing your slide deck with us. So thank you. And FCGG joins me in wishing you all a great rest of the year and a very happy and peaceful holiday season. We'll see you all in 2025. Good night.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. It was our honor and pleasure. Good night, everyone.